Recently, there's been a lot of content related to loneliness targeting Gen Z because Gen Z is the proclaimed loneliest generation, with some surveys saying up to 80% of Gen Z feels lonely, which is by far the highest amount for any generation. But there's also been a lot of content being pushed out there saying that it's okay to be alone, which I agree with to a certain extent. You should be able to handle being alone. But I feel like there's a lot of people who are in denial over their level of loneliness, that the reason why they're so lonely is because they like to be alone. It's their choice to be alone. I know a lot of men who tell themselves this. I'm someone who used to tell myself this, that the reason why I have no friends, the reason why I was never in a relationship, was because I liked being alone. Which I do, by the way. I do appreciate my alone time, but not to the extent in which you don't communicate to another human being unless you're talking to the In-N-Out cashier or the crackhead asking for change at the gas station. That's what worries me about the crazy rise of Gen Z loneliness. Not the people who are lonely, don't want to be lonely, and can't figure out how not to be lonely. It's the people who convince themselves that they don't need any human interaction in order to properly function. They convince themselves that going through life alone is better than going through it with other people. There's a lot of reasons why some people at Gen Z do this, specifically young Gen Z men. Now, Gen Z men have been a hot topic online over the past few years, usually for negative reasons. Things like the rise of the red pill, which Gen Z men ate up like hungry dogs, which conversely led to the rise of conservatism for Gen Z men. And when you add things like Gen Z men are having fewer friendships, are often single and maidenless, they haven't even hugged a woman who wasn't part of their family. It all ties back to them being extremely lonely. And I understand there's more nuance to the subject, but I think loneliness does play a huge part in all of this. Going back to my original point, there are some people at Gen Z who are in denial over their loneliness, that their loneliness is a choice, conscious decision they made for themselves, that human beings are just annoying and I would rather not put up with any of it. I honestly think it's just a coping mechanism so they don't have to acknowledge that they feel lonely in the guise of self-improvement or that they feel fine. I'm just focusing on myself, trying to make myself into the best man possible, improve my body, gain more wealth, learn new things. It's like when a guy or girl tells someone that they don't want a serious relationship with them because they are working on themselves and aren't ready for that type of commitment, but then you find out 1 week later that they're in a serious relationship all of a sudden. It's just a lie so they don't hurt someone's feelings. In this case, yourself. Loneliness in general comes from a lot of different factors, because you would think with the rise of things like social media, it would make people feel more connected, less lonely, this sense of togetherness. But what we have seen over the years is that that's just not the case. Social media, if anything, has made people feel more lonely, less connected, because instead of feeling like you're part of something, you end up comparing yourself to people. People who look like they're doing much better than you. They're in a relationship, they have a bunch of friends. Every week they're doing all these exciting things. They're living a life that you wish you had, without realizing that this is the minority. Like I mentioned earlier, up to 80% of Gen Z feel lonely. You're not the only person who feels like they're by themselves. Matter of fact, the people posting themselves living the dream might also feel lonely, because loneliness doesn't stem from not having a bunch of people who care about you. Loneliness comes from feeling like you're by yourself. I have the most supportive family ever. I love them to death. But even when I had their support, I still felt extremely lonely. And a lot of that has to do with me being stuck in my own head. One thing that I've noticed for Gen Z men specifically is the dating aspect of loneliness, the denial. A lot of these men convince themselves that they're single by choice.
Stop the cap.
And not the inability to attract a woman. This used to be me. For the longest time, I was convinced that the reason why I was single was because I was working on myself, that I wasn't ready for a relationship, which was true. But when I thought I was ready and started to pursue relationships, I had no success. I didn't even know how to talk to a woman in a relationship aspect way. I knew how to talk to women in general, but more of a polite way, in a school setting, group project way. Flirting might as well have been another language. And I also struggled with figuring out if a woman was flirting with me or just being nice. Most of the cases, looking back at it, they were just being nice. And since I didn't really know how to talk to women in real life, you know where that led me to? Dating apps. Oh my gosh, if you're a man who has nothing going for yourself, dating apps are a terrible experience.
Demon. human force, one of Satan's greatest soldiers.
It wasn't even not getting any matches. I didn't get a lot, especially on Tinder, but I got some on Hinge. It was actually where I got most of my matches. The problem I ran into is trying to finagle my way into a date on these apps. You see, on these apps, you, as the man, is entertaining the woman. It's up to you to keep the conversation moving. The problem was that I sucked at this. I had no experience talking to women, but also I wasn't an interesting person to begin with. I was a very lonely person. I had no hobbies, no friends, and I wasn't on any social media apps unless it was for doom scrolling. Finstas pretty much. So all the pictures on my profile were like me in my car and apartment, or like 3-year-old family vacation pics in Vegas.
In the film.
Oh, God.
Just like that. That was, I believe.
I wouldn't swipe right on myself. I realized I wasn't single because I wanted to be single. I was single because I didn't have the ability to not be single. And a lot of that has to do with my loneliness and denial of it. It's kind of hard to admit that you are lonely, that you actually are struggling by yourself. Even if you have people who can support you, family or friends, you don't want to burden them with your struggles because you think they will judge you and only see you as someone who brings down the mood. But we have to realize that if we want help, we have to help ourselves first. We have to be willing to accept there is something going wrong, that we don't want to feel like this. And the simplest advice I can give you is just to touch grass more often.
Who would have thought?
Be more communicative with the people you want to interact with. Stop treating everyone like NPCs, but as actual human beings. Whether it's saying please and thank yous, creating small talk over trivial stuff, giving more compliments on things like tattoos or what someone is wearing, you know, innocent stuff. Just exist. Just don't be a ghost in people's lives because they aren't going to see you. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe, and adios.